Okay, it is 10 o'clock. We're going to go ahead and start right up. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for being here for a special board meeting. Remember, just a quick reminder to everybody, a special board meeting, we cannot change the agenda once we start, or actually at this point, we can't change the agenda. I do thank you for being here. We have a full agenda. We're looking at probably about 2 hours. There will be a closed session, just a quick reminder on that. And at this point, Ms. Bowie, would you please call the roll?
Good morning. Pete Wildebohr.
Present.
Melissa Mason.
Here.
Josie Barnhart.
Here.
Pat Bradford.
I am here.
Stephanie Crable.
Here.
Key McManus.
Present.
And Stephanie Walker.
And we've asked Ms. Mason, because she's back, to lead us in the pledge. But before that, I would ask Pastor Tabor to step forward, and she will be leading us in our invocation. Thank you for being here, Pastor.
Let's pray together, y'all. Holy One, today as we gather to do the work of providing for the education of all children in New Hanover County, we first pause to remember to give thanks. We thank you for the beauty of your creation and for our mandate to care for all that is in it, especially children who are often the least among us. We pray for those who would see children as pawns or as things rather than as your beloved creation. We pray that they would have a change of heart and recognize the value of each and every human being as created by you just as they are. Guide us as we face times of concern and fear, that this body would always be working for the safety of all students and for all teachers in this wonderful and beautiful array of who they are. We pray for your guidance in this discussion around hiring a new superintendent, and that the choices and vision will be ever toward all, and especially those who are often overlooked or mistreated. May the decisions made here today be inclusive and equitable and for all. When we have difference of opinions, give us a unity of spirit and help us to hold each other in full regard in our shared humanity. Aid this body in the work as a unified team, that they would lead New Hanover County Schools, and for every child and family to know their worth and their value to this body and to the community at large. In our ever-changing world, we pray for these board members and for the various level of official and staff who serve New Hanover County. Bless this body, that their decisions would benefit those who work for, attend, and have a child or person for whom they care for in New Hanover County Schools. In all the names that we call holy. Amen.
Thank you, Pastor. Ms. Mason.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay. Big job in front of us today, folks, and I do appreciate everyone being here. Ms. Walker is on her way. She should be joining us momentarily. But at this point, we have a quorum, so we will move forward. I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Your first and second. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed. That carries 6-0. And we will continue on with the NCSBA presentation.
Ms. Sheaf, I think you're muted.
If you wouldn't mind. Is the problem on our end or there? Oh, okay.
Oh, but you can't hear us tell her that either, because our mute button's on.
Well, what do you want to tell her, that she's
She's muted.
muted?
But of course, we're muted too, so. Can you unmute us and we can tell her? Ms. Sheaf, you're muted if you're talking to us, ma'am. Oh, that's probably better than to say.
Well, in the interest of time, I'm going to just say that, just to let you know, when we get to the next section, which is the interim superintendent criteria, I would like to give everybody, say, about 3 minutes if they'd like to speak. And we probably have different ideas. We can kind of bring that group of criteria together.
Can you hear me now?
Oh, here we go. Okay. I'll say that again later. Yes, ma'am, we can hear you now. Let you know when we get to the next section. Morning. For a second. If you can hear us, we can't hear you. Yes, ma'am, we can.
I think there is an incredibly long lag. Can you all? Let me try that.
We got you now.
Okay, I just want to make sure that everyone can hear me.
Yes, we can.
I think there is an incredibly long lag. Can you all?
We got you now.
Okay, I just want to make sure that everyone can hear me.
We hear you.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, ma'am, we can hear you.
Okay, I apologize for that. It was taking, I would say something and then we would hear it on your live stream about 90 seconds later. So I think we are now real time. I apologize for the technical issues on our end. They did not pop up when I tested my audio. I'm Christine. I am.
We're back into having trouble.
Okay.
Now you're good.
Okay, great. I'm Christine Sheep. I'm the legal counsel and director of policy at the North Carolina School Boards Association. Here I am. I did want to say we have an assistant legal counsel for superintendent search, Sam Thorpe, who was not available this week. And so I appreciate you all letting me come and talk to you briefly about your interim superintendent search. I understand there were some questions about our process, and so I just plan to provide a brief overview of what we are able to do to help local boards who are in need of an interim superintendent search and ask for assistance from us. It's an informal service that we provide. Sam has been doing superintendent searches for 7 years now, and so during that time, he has developed relationships with a lot of different candidates and superintendents, including superintendents who are retired. And generally, when someone retires, they will let us know if they would like to be considered for interim superintendent roles. And so Sam has kept a list of individuals over the years who are willing to do that. The understanding with all of those individuals is that as openings become available, we will contact them to see if they would be interested in speaking with the board, the particular board, because of course, as retired superintendents, there are retirement issues that come with serving as an interim superintendent. They may have other things planned, just things like that. Sometimes folks are not willing to travel if that would be required for a position. So basically what happens is when a local board reaches out and says that they are interested in names of individuals who might be interested in serving as an interim, Sam will contact folks who've expressed interest and who are geographically convenient, people who are either willing to travel or are close enough by that they wouldn't have to travel, and just let them know that a particular board is looking for an interim candidate and ask whether they're interested in speaking to the board. And if they are, Sam will pass along the resumes. And so that's what he has done to this point. And that really is the limit of the service that we provide. We don't set up interviews. We don't do any background checks. Those are all things that we do as part of our permanent superintendent search services. But for this more informal process on our end, we don't do those things. We do have some sample questions for interim interviews that we would be happy to share if the board is interested in. But basically, in addition to the folks that Sam has on his list, we do periodically, as openings come up, receive resumes from other people who are become aware of specific openings, and they will send their resumes and let Sam know that they're interested, just because, again, he's so experienced and well known among candidates, and he will pass on those resumes as well. And that's our process. I'm happy to answer any questions the board might have about that, and I apologize again for the delays in getting on with you in real time.
Ms. Craybill?
Thanks for being here, Christine. We appreciate this is Stephanie Craybill. Thanks for being here with us. So a couple questions that I wanted to just sort of throw out on the table for us. But so is a pool of like 3 to 5 people enough for us to move forward with the interim superintendent? And I guess the timeline, should our timeline, how long should we expect the timeline to be once we decide who we want to interview to the time that we get interviews? Like, do you guys call them, or does our lawyer call them to make those appointments?
So as to your first question, the size of your pool, that's entirely up to the board. There are some boards that will zero in on a person early and decide that this is who they want, and they'll negotiate directly with that person. There are some boards that will do several interviews, and it really is just up to the board and what criteria you have and how well the pool that you have meets that criteria. In terms of the timeline, that can depend on a number of factors. I know that you have an acting superintendent, and so you're not in a position where you need someone in the role next week, say. In terms of setting up interviews and doing all of that, that's not something that NCSBA does. Once we've passed on the resumes, the expectation is that if the board would like to speak with any of those candidates, that someone representing the board, typically it would be the board attorney, would be contacting candidates to set up interviews.
Okay, great, thank you.
And I would like to ask, you had mentioned questions. I think we would love to have the questions that you guys would recommend, if you wouldn't mind. Bless you.
Bless you.
Sending those over to us, either to myself or to our attorneys, and we can share it out to the whole board.
Absolutely.
Mr. Wilmore?
Yes, ma'am.
And then do you all also have sample interim contracts that we could look at? Just that some of the major things that we should be putting in that?
I believe we do have those. I will need to double check with Sam to locate them. But yes, I'm sure we have those, and we could share those as well.
Okay, great, thank you.
Other board members, any questions? No? Okay, I think we're good. Thank you so much for coming today, and I'm sure we'll be, talking, or Mr. Thorpe will be talking with us more in the future about this, but appreciate the overview.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You all have a good day.
Thank you. And as I started to say before, I'd like to give everybody, say, 3 minutes to talk, to speak and to bring their thoughts together. I'm going to start, if you don't mind. Well, I'm going to start even if you do mind. What I did is actually I had a person come up to me at the last meeting and said, I thought you really wanted to hear from folks. And, I thought about it, originally I said, well, we definitely do want to for the permanent superintendent, but I thought about the fact that, I really do want to hear from folks that are, in the principalship at this point. So I actually was able to reach out and just talk, and I did let Dr. Barnes know about it, that I, reached out to some principals, talked to them, wide variety, elementary. I did not speak to anybody in pre-K, but spoke to, some folks at the elementary level, middle school level, high school level, male, female, African-American, white, so, kind of across the board, asking for, basically what I was looking for was 5 characteristics that you would think, around 5 characteristics that you would like to have in your next superintendent and/or interim superintendent. And I did get a list. I'm going to read the whole list, and I'm going to give you what I gleaned as were some of the top ones that I heard throughout. So, and I did share with the principals I was not going to share their names, so I will not share their names at this point. But first person said connected to schools. They need to trust their principals and their teachers. They need to be honest and transparent. All kids are important. That needs to be a focus. And they need to be available. The second person, they said the one and only thing that they really wanted to focus on was an experienced person. The third said no environment of New Hanover County schools. They need to be a humble servant leader. They need to be school focused. They need to get to know their principals. They need to be vested in becoming a partner with the school system. Fourth person said strong instructional leader, listening to feedback, but not only listening to feedback, as we've heard before from folks, doing something with that. Welcoming to all and strategic. The fifth person said strong communicator, relationship with principals, advocate for all schools, lifting them up in the community, student-centered, problem solver, no school level, and innovative. The sixth person said a people person, personable, respectful, and approachable. And the last person said experience as a principal, especially high school, because there's a lot more to, not a lot more, but a lot of different challenges as a high school principal. Transparent, a people person, genuine celebrations, not spending a lot of money on them necessarily, but a genuine celebration, and supporting teachers at the grassroots level. So I do thank, if any of those folks are listening, for their input. And what I gleaned, my five, if we're going to limit to five and limit it to that, is a people person, the person that knows their principals and is approachable, as my first. Second one is instructional leader, a supporter of schools and support teachers. Third is student-centered. Fourth is honest and transparent. And fifth is experienced. So I'm going to start to my right. If you'd like to share your thoughts, those are my thoughts.
What was your last name?
Experienced.
Mr. Warble, can I ask a question on, just for clarification? Are you talking experienced as a superintendent, or experienced as a teacher, principal, assistant principal, central office person, or business leader? I mean, experienced is quite a broad word.
Well, it is. It is. I would say my thought is experienced in the school realm. In the school
Education sector.
Yes. Okay, and I think that's what
Okay.
the person was talking about.
Okay.
Okay. Ms. Mason, could you go next, please?
So, in thinking about previous experiences with superintendents, not simply the most recent, but the one further back, I really wanted to kind of dig into what the positives and the negatives we could draw from those. And so I simply have a list. I was not able to meet with principals. I was out of the state. But so what I have is transparency. I think we all can agree that that's important. Communication skills, familiarity with schools. And a lot of these I feel like we're going to be hearing over and over again. Willingness to take direction, openness regarding negatives and positives, ways that we need to improve and ways that we're doing amazing things. Good financial management, I think that's vital, particularly after the challenging few years we've had with budget. I think that they need to have a good knowledge of the finances and financial management. Solid knowledge of the educational law, knowing what is okay and what isn't. Flexibility, being trustworthy, and having an academic and safety focus. Those are two things that I know that we as a board have put right at the top of our list, and so I think that our interim and or our permanent superintendent should have those as a focus as well. And that's what I have.
Thank you, Ms. Mason. Ms. Bradford.
One thing I want to really focus on is a split board, a divisive board will never hire a good superintendent. They just won't. If we can't come into agreement for the students we serve and pick a good candidate, then we have completely failed. I'm concerned about that. So probably my number one thing is going to be knows how to unify people. Obviously, we all want transparency. Collaborative communicator, listening laterally and vertically. Laterally and vertically. I think that covers our superintendent, our principals, our vice principals, our, bus drivers, everyone in the system, students, parents, and so on. Somebody who can reestablish trust in the school district and morale and take direction. And I think I've hit 5. I'm also looking for a fresh perspective, curriculum and literacy focused. Obviously, if in this next cycle we want to go into a bond, somebody that had some bond experience would be lovely. Shortfall experience in finances would be lovely. Innovative leader, not just his vision, but innovative and established credibility.
Thank you. Mr. McManus.
Morning.
Hello, sir.
Well, I strongly agree with what everybody said. Honestly, I won't be repetitive, but I did make some notes, and I just feel like we're all going to basically say the same thing. Accessibility is crucial. We've heard that, and that's accessibility to any and all. It's tough. That's part of the job. Like being a principal. Somebody walks in the door, you need to see them. It's not going away. So, accessibility. 2, listens, which everybody said. Listens means that you're not doing something else while you're listening. You're not writing, you're not looking at your phone, you're listening. I own you when I come to talk to you. So I feel like you're vested in what I'm saying. Whether you agree or not, at least you're listening to me respectfully. Communications, I can't underestimate. I cannot overemphasize. It's, you have to be communicative. That means there are no surprises. That means that you make sure that the board's aware of what you want to do before you do it. And then we can discuss it. So surprises are a killer. And particularly surprises when we hear it from our staff members and we didn't hear it from our leadership. Obviously instructional. But all these combined take care of instructional. If you remember when we did our priorities way back, visibility absolutely is a killer for a superintendent. I realize that. But it's like a principal. You've got to be seen, you've got to be in the hallway, you've got to go in the classroom, everybody's got to know that you're there. And so I think visibility is a major area for our new individual, whoever that he or she may be. The budget, I'm going to say it, if we didn't have to pay $7 million for the charter schools, we wouldn't have a budget problem. And the budget is it's draining everything we've got. Think about it. $7 million we're paying for students to go to private schools, charter schools, programs, doesn't make a difference. If you meet that, okay. And no surprises, absolutely, no matter what. It's just, we need to be informed. And that works both ways. We don't surprise the suit as well. If we've got something we need to talk about, we need to bring it to them. And last but certainly not least, non-political. The SOUP has to be extremely important who they align with, intentionally or not. And so if you align yourself with someone that we all know is very political, then you upset somebody else on the other side. That's tough to do, to walk that fine line. Real tough. We are political. We may not want to admit it, but we are. That's where we ran. But a superintendent should not be identifiable that they lean toward or lean against. That's essentially what I would say.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Ms. Walker.
Thank you. Oh my gosh, everything. But also, and I respect you out there and got really good feedback from folks on the ground, because that to me is hugely important. I think the ones that stuck out to me were connected to schools and a servant leader. That is huge for me. But I want to say first, before I get to the list, and I'll be as brief as possible, that survey said a lot but it also said a lot about us. And I'm really hoping if we're listening more, if we're more transparent, if we're getting feedback, that, you know, that's going to help build trust with the community on our side of the things. But echoing all the feedback that everyone, you know, has given so far, communication is essential. I mean, it's essential to everything, but that's top of my list. But honestly, that goes along with consensus building up and down the chain of whatever, from us all the way down. Very important, and the listening part of it. Must be grounded in what is best for all our students, with an empathetic ear, because we're in this business for students and staff. And I'll say teachers in generally it's a calling, I believe, and I believe they do it because they love what they do, and they love to see, you know, how they affect children, and they do. And I can speak from personal experience, those rare teachers that, what I wasn't getting at home, I got in a sense that they saw me as a kid, and that really makes a difference. So if they're supported from us and from a superintendent, I think that's huge. I spoke to a very well-respected retired superintendent that lives in our area, and she did talk about consensus building with the board, and I believe that has to happen. We don't want to be divided on things, and if we can get to you know, if there's an issue coming up, whatever it may be, and, you know, we can build consensus and we can be more united in our votes, it's a big deal. I mean, we might not always get there, and that's okay, but, you know, she talked about how, you know, when an important thing was coming up, she would speak to each one of us and really kind of talk it out. And, you know, you never know, you can get on a consensus there. And I already talked about it, but, you know, we're in the business of being student-focused and staff-focused, and in a business that serves people in a public way with public money, so we really have to be respectful of that. And lastly, the budget is huge. I went to a K through 12 on Institute thing this weekend, and they were talking about budget. Now, I talked about the PTSD I had over it. We had like 6 meetings, and it was like that in 22 as well. And I just we don't want to do that. I felt a disconnect with our commissioners, and we have to work with them. We're all part of this community, and I just was very kind of struck by the fact that we felt so fragmented, you know, as elected bodies, and I don't want that to happen anymore. So I'm hoping, I mean, I know we're talking about interim right now, but this applies absolutely to our permanent as well. So I'm keeping our lists. We should build it together and just, you know, get a good list going. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Walker. Ms. Craybill.
So I am going to take a little bit of a different approach, is that we all listed a lot of characteristics which to me are just given, that the person needs to be trustworthy and transparent, honest, show no favoritism to individual board members, get past the fact that it only takes 4, because that gets to Ms. Bradford's point, we can't be divided, and we are. The no surprises to us, but mainly from us, because I feel like a lot of the situation that we're in is because of us and because of our behavior, because we get outside of our governance lane. And we reach out to people in the community inappropriately. We reach out to candidates for jobs inappropriately. So I believe that communication is important, but we have to manage ourselves. I think we have to look internally for that. And I don't know how to say this as a characteristic, but, well, yes, I do. We need an interim superintendent who is going to, yes, take direction from the board, because we have all unilaterally come to that decision, but somebody who will push back a little bit and say, our district can't handle that right at this moment, or our district can handle it, we're going to need some steps in place to try and help us not be impulsive teenagers with a frontal lobe that is not developed and just spewing out stuff. So I'm talking more about our interim right now, because that's what our focus is. Our interim has to be able to see where we are, take a look at our systems. We have to give him systems, or her. We have to give them systems to look at, so that I don't even know that we know what our systems are that are out of shape. I've got a couple of them that I would like to talk with in closed session because I don't want to call out a specific person, or category. But we have to look at our systems. We have a huge climate and culture issue, and we need to allow the interim superintendent to investigate that openly, honestly, on their terms, not on us going, go find out. And I've heard us say so many times, we got to get to the bottom of this and get rid of it. We can't go in with the get to the bottom of this mentality because that will just push people away even more. So I think we need to be able to direct our superintendent, and I know from the past superintendent search, they gave the assistant superintendent, the interim, some direction on please look at these systems. Not please look at this system and get rid of that person or get rid of that department or get rid of that, because maybe that's not what the fresh set of eyes would find. So I am very supportive of a fresh set of eyes looking at what we have, where we are right now. It's kind of like an EOG, that the interim superintendent should come in, assess, where they are, and an experience, that's why I asked you the experience, because an experienced person will know where they've seen other issues in other school districts, and might go straight to look at that. We have to be very willing to accept the feedback that we're getting from this interim, especially if it focuses on us. And because I really think that we are a major part of the problem with that. I do like, when people were talking about, the no surprises is one that is just key on. But a good leader doesn't necessarily have to have their thumb on everything. A good leader listens, observes, listens, processes, evaluates, sees where we are in comparison to best educational practices out there. Definitely we have to have someone that understands the finances, but we have to have someone that understands educational law and policies and is willing to open their mouth and say, that's against our policies. I don't want to do that. I'm not comfortable with doing that. And we need somebody that is going to not worry about us firing him or her because we don't like that he or she doesn't take the direction that we give. And so all of these things are important for an interim, for a regular. But I think that we need to have somebody in the interim who is can look objectively, observe, evaluate, compare. The plan, do, check, act cycle. The total quality, how you look at things. That they get feedback from a broad spectrum, not just, each one of us has our own little circle of influence. And so we need an interim that is outside of our circles of influence, that is creating, is learning more about that. So to me, I think we need to focus on systems that we want the interim to look at, and all the while being transparent about that, and making sure that this interim does not feel like he or she is being used by us to forward, any sort of agenda. I'm not even saying politics, I'm just saying any sort of agenda. That person needs to be free to make those calls, and if it's a hard thing, to take some decisive action. But we have to be committed to that person, that we won't, I don't want to say challenge, because sometimes you do have to challenge, but challenge can be used in a very negative way. So that's what I'm looking for in an interim, someone that can help us make some turns, bubble some things to the surface, point out what we're doing well, because we're not just a bumbling, school system. We've got a lot of good stuff going on, and we need somebody that can recognize that and then use some of the best practices that we use to get there to help us in the systems that we are failing in, or that we could do much better in.
Thank you, Ms. Graybill. And last but not least, for sure, Ms. Barnhart.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think the biggest thing for me is focusing on a smooth transition. And with that, we obviously have to have input from our staff. I think one of the things that we've discussed from what I've gathered is this upcoming town hall with our staff. So I think it's really important to solicit and make sure that we're talking to them, getting their input prior to making a decision. Just some procedural stuff. I think a month-to-month interim is a smarter move to look at as we're going through with this process. I'm going to echo the collaborative communication, and I know a few of us had talked about this last time, of discussing not just the idea, right? If the superintendent has the idea, making sure that we understand the idea, so we do a better job being able to advocate and collectively communicate what is actually happening. We keep hearing about discipline, and while I understand it's the principal's job to allow discipline to happen, we need a superintendent who is going to support that and also continue to help the principals grow and make that better. But just because there's a discipline number does not mean that that school did something wrong. I think that that's something that we need to look into. The other thing that I put down, two things, is a growth mindset. We have a wide range of students from pre-K to 12th grade. We have some schools that are already doing so well and extremely successful. And when you talk about a growth mindset, you're intentionally looking at the scaffolding, the supports that the students need of all areas. And so I think focusing on that will get you to the ultimate goal of proficiency and the things that you want to see for all students. The other thing is innovation. We talked about funding for our students. While I've been vocal that I think the funding model needs to change, one of the realities is we get grant funding as part of the cycle. We have an opportunity here with the endowment locally as well as statewide grants. And a leader needs to be willing and able to see a vision and have innovation so that we can be part of a pilot if a bill comes up, or we can have a grant written. That's only going to enhance the capability for our students and our staff to do their job. We have a few in place currently. There was an AI security pilot that we've received funding for the General Assembly, as well as the advanced teacher roles, and we need to make sure those things are going to be continuing to go on and continue supported. I know last year we got funding for tutorings and intentionality with that. So I think that when you're looking at some of these changes you want to see, the positive growth, the curriculum, the development of that, you have to say, how are you going to do that as a leader? And I feel like the superintendent having those qualities of being able to say, how can they secure some of those things and then give it to their staff to say, here, now you can take and implement it. So innovation and supporting and discipline are two. Collaborative communication. I'm going to add in here, I think that it would be important for all members to be present when we choose both the interim and the superintendent. And that's my list.
Thank you. Is there anything anybody else would like to bring that they've
Can I
forgotten?
add one more thing?
The,
And I hadn't really thought about it because in my mind, I'm thinking that I believe that we need to make this interim choice before school starts so that the interim, can get their marching orders, for lack of a better word, from us, that they'll have a chance to be at all the back-to-school meetings. They'll have a chance to be at the back-to-school principal meeting, at the back-to-school department meetings, and so that he or she can clearly identify, can listen, but can also set expectations of what their role is. So I believe time is of the essence for our interim so that we can get to what Ms. Barnhart had said on a smooth transition. That the longer we wait and school gets started, it's going to be really hard.
And I will note, Ms. Bowie brought to my attention, in case you don't know, I think most people do know that on August 13th, which is also our town hall day, it will be the big principals meeting.
So wouldn't it be nice to have somebody selected prior to that?
Bradford?
I'm going to speak to exactly that. Anybody who thinks that we can hire anyone in 2 weeks has just no experience in the hiring process. It doesn't move that quickly. And if you go back, let's jump ahead to the permanent superintendent. We had when the school system fired the leadership because of the sexual crimes that were being committed. There was a month with really no leadership if you go back and look. And then an interim was hired, and they were here for 6 months. So you had a 7-month period of an interim. It's half a school year. So to think that we can rush this, I'm not willing to rush it. And anybody who thinks we can do it in that amount of time, they don't know what they're talking about. It would be irresponsible and it would be impulsive. And we've been accused of those two things in the last 2 weeks by a board member. That would be both those things, irresponsibly and impulsive. We've got to look at this. If you count out 7 months from today, and all the experts that I talk to about hiring processes for somebody at this level, they're saying 5 to 8 months maximum for the superintendent. Let's jump ahead. So, if it takes 5 to 8 months and we start today, December would be 5 months, January would be 6 months, February would be 7 months, March would be 8 months. So our interim needs to get our schools up and running for us, yes. But we can't rush this process. I can't tell you the number of people who have told me, we rushed our process and it cost us dearly. We rushed our process and we had to fire that person. We don't need to go down that road again. We don't need to go down that road. We need to take our time. We need to vet. We need to interview. Again, I've said it before, we don't need to interview 1 time. We need to interview 2 times. We need to go and check all of the publicity on that person. We need to call people in that district and say, hey, how did that go for you? We need to put the time out for the superintendent that we need to do. And I don't want to rush it. I don't want to rush the interim process either. Some of that we can talk about in closed session. But this pell-mell to get this done is not sitting well with me at all. And no one who is an expert in the field of human resources and hiring will tell you rushing is always a negative. Thank you.
Thank you. Walker.
So I understand the discomfort in the timeliness of it, but I do take the point of, having somebody interim-wise. I mean, and that's why we have people helping us with it that have a pool. I don't think it should be rushed. I agree with you. I think in the last case, obviously chaos ensued, and then it was like, oh my gosh, we got to do it. But then COVID rolled out. So I think the length of that one probably was a little bit longer for a number of reasons, probably not just all the chaos that was going on. I personally, this is probably me being a little selfish here, but I think I have like 5 months left on this board. I would like to be a big contributor to who we do hire, because it really kind of got, well, you say it did get rushed, but I felt like it almost felt rushed before I got on the board, and I didn't get a say in who I worked with, which was a little irritated about. But I don't know. I mean, I agree it shouldn't be quick, but I mean, in this case, if we know we've got well, we don't know, we haven't talked about a good pool of people that have a really long, extensive resume and can be trusted, I think we can get an interim in place decently quickly. The other search, we'll have to see. But I mean, I think if, I have had feedback from, other superintendents to talk about, and I think Dr. Barnes talked about getting a national search, organization involved, and I think it's their job to help us with that. But I understand the worry and concern, but I don't think it should take a half a year to get someone in place permanently.
Thank you. I think Ms. Walker just brought up an interesting point as far as we do have a new board coming in a few months, and so that's something for us to discuss too as far as hiring the superintendent, and maybe we want the new board members' input with that. But the other thing I was going to say is I'm really going to echo, we have a town hall in place on the 13th to provide an opportunity for our staff to give us feedback, and I think that we would be doing a disservice if we didn't at least do that prior to selecting an interim person. So I do understand the need for that smooth transition and wanting to have somebody in place so that we know here's the person. But I also can understand that we want to allow the opportunity for our staff to provide us feedback. So as we're making these decisions looking forward, it will help to provide a transition. We do have an acting interim that I'm excited that he sent out a notification that we're meeting and being able to kind of get caught up and staying in the loop and practicing that collective communication that we've been talking we want to see more of. So I think for my instance, the point of this meeting, we were talking about wanting to talk about the criteria, but knowing that we have something on the calendar for the 13th to allow the staff to talk to us, I think we need to go forward with that.
And just to, do anybody else have first round? If not, let's go with Crable.
So two things. I would like to hear, if Ms. Bowie doesn't mind, I think she's the only one in this room that was a part of the last go-round. Dr. Barnes wasn't even here. So if you have any recollection of the timing from when the superintendent, I might be wrong. I don't think he was fired. I think he resigned. But I don't know. But can you talk to us about that? Does your memory serve you on that?
So with the previous transition between superintendents, administration resigned. It was either the first Friday of February or the second Friday of February of 2020. And then our interim superintendent, Dr. Dale Burns, was in place, in office, meeting with staff in our schools and supporting the board by the first Monday of that March. So there was no more than 3 to 4 weeks between the two superintendents, the outgoing and the incoming interim. And as I've shared with the board before, the interim superintendent, that first day that he was with us as our interim superintendent, he met with every central office location. He started with the administration building, then he went to the Spencer building, and then we finished up his connection with the teams at the CBRC complex. By the end of that week, he had already had a principals meeting, and he very much set the tone for the expectations of the principal and for our school staffs. Unfortunately, within the next 10 days, COVID hit, and the district, as well as all other districts, they had to shut down. However, he was still very much leading the district. He met with senior staff. At some point, there were days he met daily, and if not daily, then it was either weekly or every other day, just depending on where we were based on the transition with COVID, and then other items that he was also working on that had been directed to him by the current board at that time.
And thank you, Ms. Bowie, appreciate that. And the other thing I just wanted to bring us back to a circle is the focus of this meeting today, my understanding, is to talk about the interim. And the interim and the permanent, are two different entities. They have two different purposes. So before we close our mind to what we think is the best thing for an interim, perhaps we interview some of the people who have experience as interims or having worked for an interim. So why don't we hold that thought in our heads, not to say it's right or it's wrong, and bring our interview process out. We can ask that question of our candidates. With that, how do they feel about, would they like to be in place before the school system before school starts, on a large scale? We already know some people are in school, we know that. So perhaps that's a good interview process, because we are not experts. Not one of us here, is an expert in this. We were not involved in the previous one. We all watched from afar. Some of us were watching very closely because our campaigns were there, so we had to pay attention to some of this kind of stuff. So I would caution us not to get ahead of ourselves in what we think is best, because a lot of the things we said was that we want the superintendent to take direction and we don't want surprises. But why don't we ask the people that are coming what their thoughts are on that? Because that's who we're hiring, because we're only hiring them interimly. And just to know, an interim can quit at any point in time. If we as a board can't come together on things, we can't come together on what we're directing them to do, that person could just be out of here and then we're gone. This interim is just to keep us floating. And the longer we put it off, the harder it's going to be. The input at town halls are going to be good to inform the interim on where we might need, what systems we haven't thought of that they might want to uncover. So I'm not saying we don't want to hear from them, but we don't have to hear from them before we decide. with that. So that's just, I just wish we could include that in the interview process.
Ms. Walker?
Thank you. As I mentioned before, I had the opportunity to speak to a well-respected retired superintendent. And in fact, I don't have the exact statistic, but I think in this area, we have like 11 really good retired superintendents that we can get feedback from that would be more than willing to come and talk to us if we want and help us with the process that they know very, very well. And, you know, obviously just with the idea of just helping us, I mean, really from that aspect, not for the job or whatever. And I've already had one say that they would be willing to do that if we're open to it.
Thank you. Bradford?
2 points. One, I don't think the interim superintendent is here just to keep a lid on things, to keep them frozen for that period of time. I think the ball needs to be advancing as best it can. And I have two ideas that might be out there for some of you. But I did a budgeting workshop, not the same one that Ms. Walker did, but I did a finance and budgeting for school boards workshop last week, and I was like shocked at all the things that they said we should be doing or we should know and so on and should have. And I was like, well, we don't have any of that. And so at the same time, I am all about systems. Systems need to be in place, and when systems are in place, when the top person has to step away, then the organization runs well. I think we could ask the county commission for some money for two different consulting firms. One, to come and talk to us about financing and budget, to look into where we are, so that when we do have a new superintendent, they're starting with a kind of a clean plate and they know exactly what they're looking at. They don't have to do that investigative process for themselves. And second, a different kind of consultant that could talk to us about our systems, discipline, the things that kind of like what Ms. Walker said, retired superintendents know what they did that worked for discipline. Granted, discipline is completely different now than it used to be, but it's still not at the same time. But to get those kind of helps, to help our interim, whoever it is, to get through that process, so when we end up with a new superintendent, we have advanced. We haven't just sat here stagnant for this 2 months, 4 months, 6 months, 8 months, half a year. I mean, we just heard from Crystal that my numbers were right, approximately a month for no superintendent, then 6 months of an interim superintendent. That's a long time to just sit with the lid on.
Ms. McManus, would you like to share?
I'm trying to process all this. From the perspective of a board member, the perspective of a board member is totally different from the perspective of an employee. If you've not worked in the school system in your life, and as I've said arrogantly, I've spent many, many decades in it, it's a whole different view. So I hear and appreciate what we're all saying collectively. If we'll just walk the talk, that's important. But I disagree. I think the interim needs to be, we don't want to rush it, but we also need someone on board soon rather than later. Because the staff needs to feel they've got that person, like it or not, but that person's in place. They know how to get them, they know who to call, and that filters down to the rest of the central office. And then it filters them to the schools. Now, what I have heard from a lot of principals is that just get someone that's communicative. What we all discussed at the beginning, listens, discipline definitely, and I appreciate you bringing that up. This is a beginning, but this person needs to be on board because they don't know. You get a brand new car, it takes forever to figure out how to work all the electronics. But this is a big system. And we're not talking about 4, 5, or 6, or 8,000 kids. We're talking to a lot of students and a lot of staff. So I feel like someone needs to get here, if someone is not already in our midst locally, who understands. And I think that, because I think for our staff, now they need to feel like, okay, wow, now we got someone that we know we can talk to. We know someone that's going to be communicative. All the above, which we've all shared. And that's going to make a big difference in our school start and where we go and how people feel in their comfort zone. So I think later than sooner, interim, we're talking interim, I think is crucial to opening the school year. Now, we all disagree, but I think it is crucial.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Mason?
I think that my fellow board members have brought up a lot of really valid points, and one thing that stuck out to me was feedback from the staff. We got that feedback from the staff, and the staff told us we don't listen, that we make decisions and we don't listen. And so if we push through and we make a decision without listening, we're going to be doing the same thing we've been doing. I'm unwilling to push through without hearing what staff has to say. And so I would have to agree that we need to, I understand the urgency, I do. At the same time, I want to listen to what's been said to me. And what's been said to me is, please hear what we have to say before you make a decision. And so I would also have to agree with Ms. Barnhart that we need to hear what staff says at the town hall before we make any decisions.
And I'm going to say, before, because I haven't had a chance to speak, you know, I think that we're talking about two very important topics, listening, which is very, very important. You know, we have heard there's, you know, a whole thing that says, you know, my goodness, you know, you guys don't listen to us. I think we do need to listen. But I mean, I don't think that there's any reason we couldn't have things set up that we, on the 13th, and this is actually what we're going to do after closed session, but on the 13th, we could listen, we could digest, and we could spend maybe a day or two and then start, you know, have our interviews lined up so that we could, you know, get that person, you know, so the interview is, the town hall is on a Tuesday. I mean, correct, right? Tuesday, yes, thank you. All right, I don't have my calendar for me. Yeah, I actually do. But it's on a Tuesday. We could have those interviews the rest of that week and have that person named by that Friday. And have that person, you know, given they would miss or possibly miss the principals meeting on the 13th. But as Ms. Bowie said, and, you know, thank you, Ms. Bowie, again for, you know, speaking. That's awesome. But, you know, we could have, by the end of that week, and that person could call a second, if needed, a second principals meeting to bring everybody in and kind of go ahead and do that. So they would be in place before the, you know, before this, yes, we have some schools that have already started, so, you know, but we'll have some others that'll start before then, but we could have that person in place in time that when the schools, the majority of the schools start, they would be in that chair. I mean, just a thought, and again, that's what we're supposed to be talking about afterwards, but that's, I mean, that's, so, all right, that's my thought.
Town hall's the 13th, and then
Is
school
it
starts
Thursday?
27th. So, I mean, we do have a little bit of time
Yeah,
there.
I mean, and I'm saying, I wouldn't even start saying, my thought, and I'm 1 out of 7, but my thought is, we start those interviews, we have those interviews set up for that week. So we go ahead, and it's not like we're calling people that, you know, afterwards and saying, hey, we have our criteria now we've heard from staff, now we're gonna go ahead and start setting, you know, have, you know, ask our attorneys to set those up, so we can go ahead and hit the ground running. I think we need to have some time to digest afterwards, not just, you know, listen, okay, we're done. You know, Ms. Bowie brought up a great point before, is I think we do need to do more than just listen. Okay, we listened, okay, now we're gonna do what we're gonna do anyway. I think we need to be very, very cognizant of listening and digesting and putting it into place, you know, so give us a small amount of time, but then go ahead and interview right out of there. So anyway, I'm going to go to Ms. Yeah, I think Ms. Walker, didn't you have your hand up?
I did.
Okay.
All right, so let's just say that is the route that we go. What would the harm be in sense some of us want to have multiple interviews, which is, from what I'm hearing around, you don't really have multiple interviews with your interims, but let's say we decide that. What would be wrong with us culling out some of the people that are on our list in the first go-round? We can talk to them about what some of our concerns are, ask them their opinion about starting early, so we already have that basis. And then looking to the town halls, that one town hall, when the communications department gives us, you know, when they are in charge of the town hall, they gather the information and they get it back to us. And we do nothing with it. So if we follow in our same track record, if we get pull my calendar back up. If we go with the 13th, then we're not going to have all of our answers on the 14th, because we will have to summarize, whoever's taking notes for us is going to have to summarize that on the 14th. And then we're going to have to read it on the 15th and 16th, and now we're into the whole next week. So who's going to gather the feedback, put it all together, call us back together so we can decide what we want to do with it? So then we get to decide who's the second person. And by that time, some of these interims will have either been snatched up by other districts, because a lot of people are in this or are looking for that kind of things. Or they may say, you know what, this board is just too much for me. And so we may not even have anybody to interview after we go along with this. So that's what my concern is that yes, we want to listen, we want to get the information, we want to process it. Who's going to pull all that together? Is it going to be you? Are we going to is our acting superintendent going to assign another one of his senior staff to pull all this information together? Is our acting superintendent going to pull it all together and say, this is what I've got? We continue to keep pushing things out and not look at the whole process of getting the information. So we are not looking at the start of school at all if we don't start something now. And we'll talk about it in closed session to see who we like on our list, see if there's any more names out there. What would be wrong with interviewing some people to just go, oh, that person's not going to work at all, no matter if our criteria is good or not. Because we'll know some people just aren't going to fit. So I just want to throw that out as a discussion point. But, acting superintendent's already got, 3 new jobs now, for, he's doing his HR, he's doing our acting, which we love. He's going to have to pull together or assign somebody to pull together this data for us, and then we have to do something with that data.
Thank you, Ms. Crable. Ms. Barnhart, excuse me.
I agree with your idea, sir, of having some interviews lined up after the town hall input. And I think that if there's somebody that took a different job, then they're no longer on the list of people. I mean, this is part of the scenario that we are currently in. But I think it's one of those things where we come together, we do our best with the small selection of people that we have for the time being, and that's what it is. But I think it's smarter to listen to our staff prior to making a decision.
Ms. Walker?
Well, the last thing I'll say is I would like to go into this in a positive mindset. I feel like we can get bogged down in all the very, very small details, but I think we're going to try and do better, and we're going to do the best we can. And hopefully, if we support each other and we get this done, I think our timeline's going to be okay. And I appreciate the impact. I wasn't thinking about the timeline. I'm a visual person, so I'm looking at the calendar. It's a good idea to get feedback. You're absolutely right. But I think, like you say, if we can line it up like you suggested and just make it smoother. We already know that we had one in place probably about 3 weeks after the last one. So it can be done, and, we just need to get to work and be positive about it.
Ms. Bradford?
I don't know what your plan was exactly for this meeting, but I would like to hear where we are now, where we are today from our acting superintendent, if that's appropriate, if that's in closed session. I don't know what we've got planned, but I mean, all these people want to know what we're doing, and we haven't addressed that yet. We keep talking about what we want, but what are we doing today? I mean, we do have the principals meeting scheduled for the 13th, which is great. We did get 2 schools open, and we got 2 more next, but I'd like to know where we are as the district right this minute, if that's appropriate.
Could that be next steps?
Yeah, I think, why don't we do that after our closed session? Let's go ahead and go into a closed session. We can discuss things in closed session, and then we can come back out and like I say, we can talk about timeline. That was my thought, is that we can talk about timeline into next steps. With that in mind,
Can I ask one question of our attorney before we go to closed session?
Absolutely.
So, no, we'll just ask it. I'll ask it in closed session.
Okay.
I'll ask it in closed session.
All right, thank you. I do call for a motion to go into closed session pursuant to General Statute 143, 318, 11A, 1, 3, and 6 to consider personnel matters and to maintain the confidentiality of personnel records under General Statute 115C, 319 through 321, and to consult with the board's attorney to preserve attorney-client privilege.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, for the second, any discussion? If not, all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, all opposed, like sign. Carries 7-0. We are in closed session. start. We're back. We are going to have a quick synopsis. Can you tell us where we are, and then we'll.
Sure. We were able to complete our leadership retreat a couple of weeks ago. We have opened Connington and Eaton to rave success. They had smooth opening schools for those two buildings. We also have been working to make sure the mobile units are up and ready to go at Porter's Neck, that they are also being installed at New Hanover High School. And I can give you a more formal update on the New Hanover High School plan and the staffing updates at Thursday's meeting. But luckily, we had petitioned to be about 140 positions over budget when school started. Part of what we were looking to use some of the money from the county to cover. We are now down right about or below 50 positions that we need to place. So we're much further along than we expected to be. We are actually now posting some elementary and secondary positions that we have gone through. We've already started interviews for the early learning facilitators as a part of the endowment grant, so that those can be ready to roll by the first day of school. And last thing, we're going to be able to start putting back in some of those areas that we talked about, AIG, ECTA, and EC teachers, and sort of revert those numbers back. So that just gives you a brief update.
Where are we standing with the family life educators?
We have found homes for them in middle schools. There is one left to place. The rest of them are already in there, and we'll be working with them to build a schedule to continue some of the work they've done with the middle school groups.
And the curriculum hasn't changed? I mean, we're still delivering the curriculum?
We're looking to have them be considered health teachers and still deliver that curriculum within those groupings. We will have to do a little bit of sharing because there are more middle schools than there are them, but we're working to sort of embed that. That's what we're doing for the rest of the summer.
How about the fifth graders in their growth and changes?
I don't know if they've devised a fifth grade plan yet. I'll have to check with curriculum instruction and see.
Thank you.
But I know that we were looking at getting them safe first and then expanding their curriculum back.
Thank you.
I just want to say we haven't, but we need to keep the right, if you haven't been in New Hanover High School since they started tearing it, you need to go into it. I went into it the very first day after Eddie announced what was going on. I went by yesterday, all their central offices, go to the cafeteria, go up around, go way back in the back. Just go look at that school. We cannot forget, we have got to have a work in progress for the county commissioners to deal with the bond. None of us will be on the board by the time it's built. Folks, it is horrible. I will say it, and I'll quote two of the advocates. Are we going to wait till someone gets hurt? Because I walked in that building and there's layer after layer of when they put up new sheetrock, when they covered old wallpaper. Right. I was there yesterday. And it's horrible. Not only that, the furniture in that school is horrible. I walked in some of those rooms, that furniture is 50 years old. We have got to continue to focus on New Hanover High School, folks. And we have dropped that from our list of priorities. I just want to make sure we keep it there.
No, and I think the first focus, obviously, is getting that comprehensive needs study done so we have a clear picture of what we need. So I've been in contact with the county manager about the funding for that.
Thank you. That was going to be my follow-up to Hugh's discussion, because I think people reached out to me about this because we did vote on that. And we voted on the ask in the meeting. Right. I'm still interested in having a good meeting with the commissioners about that, because I mean, we got to pin down something. Like you said, it is past emergent that we fix the problem. It's a safety concern, majorly. And I'm not done, but I have one more. Can we talk about the pre-K situation? There's a lot of confusion out there, and I feel staff is really concerned. They've lost a couple of leadership positions, but also we've lost a Head Start grant, and it's just very confusing for a lot of folks. And we're not enrolling third grade 3-year-olds, but we're covering the 4-year-olds we have. I just want to know what the situation is.
Okay, I'm going to give it a shot because it is a confusing.
It's very complicated.
Yes, ma'am.
And could you address the fact that this board did not do away with the Head Start program?
Well, of course not.
Point of order, I don't know if this is germane to the conversation.
It's not
It's
on the
important,
agenda.
and I don't believe it's on the
Right.
agenda.
No,
It's
I want an
important.
update.
I know, but the update was not even on the
I mean,
agenda.
germane or whatever. I mean,
not
I can do that on
agenda.
Thursday if you want.
We do it on Thursday.
okay,
Yes.
so I'll email you some questions.
All right, let me go through what, some of the things. In order for the board to be present and able and to respect all our candidates, We will be interviewing in the near future. Then we will hear from our town hall folks, for the interim position. We definitely want to hear from them on the 13th, and then we will have our final interviews after that time. So that's what we are going to be doing in the days and weeks to come. A very, very important process to find that interim superintendent that will be able to lead us in the days and weeks to come, and then finally finding the full-time and permanent superintendent. So, yes, ma'am.
Is our goal to have the interim superintendent placed before school starts?
I think that's what the board is, the preference of the board is to have that.
I was just making sure I understood.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right, at this point, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
There's a motion, is there a second?
Second.
First and second, any discussion? If not, all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you, board members. And